Welcome back to Elevated Inspiration for Sunday School. We are on lesson 8 today. This entitled An Executed Scoundrel. So, trying to get even is something that is often in foul play, in totally wrong. For instance, a couple were arguing over possession of a pickup truck to which each claimed right for ownership. So the man came up with a plan to plant cocaine raw in the vehicle, hoping that his girlfriend would get caught with it and the vehicle would be his. The plan went wrong when the police caught him in the act of planting drugs. He was arrested. There's something very satisfying about knowing that someone's evil scheme backfires. And that's what's going to happen today in our lesson that we're going to have. The lesson takes place, it's the palace, God's plan, featuring Queen Esther. The book of Esther is really unique. We have the main characters such as King Xerxes, Ahasuerus. A lot say that scholars say that the term Ahasuerus that you see in most Bibles is actually a title like we use for president. Um, but anyway, we're going to use King Ahasuerus. And then we have, in the first chapter, we have his queen, Vashti. Basically, you know how the story goes. King Ahasuerus is having a 6-month party, and at the same time, Queen Vashti is having her party on another part of the kingdom. This is during the Persia in the palace of Susa, and about 2 weeks of drinking. Even though the party lasted for 6 months, Queen Ahasuerus wanted his queen to come, and she refused to come to show off her beauty. This in chapter 1 ends with what we're going to do, King. He called his posse together and said, hey, this is really bad. Well, King, if you don't correct her in turn, all our women's is going to be all our women's is going to have a problem. So in the last chapter, it says that basically we're going to send out a decree, and you're not going to have Vashti appear anymore. A lot of time people think that Queen Vashti was killed, but it says that she will never again come into in the presence of King Ahasuerus. Manuka came up with a plan and said, hey, why don't you send out a word throughout all of the kingdom? In turn, men will have control over their wives. And if you notice verse 22 in chapter 1, it says, then he sent letters to all the king province, to each province to his own script, to every people into their own language, that each man, here it is, should be master of his own house and speak the language of his own people. So we have here in chapter 1, another main character is Mordecai, and actually Mordecai has a daughter who is Hadassah, but we know her by Esther. Correction, this is not Mordecai's daughter. He treats her like a daughter, but Esther is actually an offering. She loses her mother and father, and Mordecai is her uncle, and actually Mordecai raised her like his daughter. Now Esther had to be some type of woman because she was very beautiful. We actually noticed that in chapter 2. The king decided to have a more like a beauty contest because he wakes up the next day, and like most people, when you're drunk, you make a decision that's bad and you kind of regretful for that decision. So they decide to have a beauty contest, so the king can pick another replacement for Queen Vashti. And actually, if you notice the scripture in the 2nd chapter, the 15th verse, it tells us that Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. So that means that she was a beautiful woman. Actually, if you look at it again, and when it was her time to go to King Ahasuerus, it says the king loved Esther more than all the other women and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the other virgins. So he set a royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vesta. Basically, we don't hear any more about Queen Vesta. That's in chapter 2. She is no longer talked about, and Esther takes the role of queen. And then all of a sudden we have in chapter 3 we have Haman comes on scene. Haman, if you actually look at this, Haman um, um, was an Amalekite, and basically the Amalekite and the Jews always went back and have issues. Um, and if you actually look at Mordecai descendant, you'll see that Mordecai comes from the tribe of Benjamin. And who was from that tribe of Benjamin? Actually, Israel's first king, who is Saul. Saul's supposed to have destroyed all of the Amalekites. Haman, who is descendant from King Agag, who was the king over the Amalekites. So a lot of time we see that Mordecai failed to bow down to Haman. We think of Daniel, but in actuality it's not reference to Daniel at all. This is more reference to more of a lineages between two tribes hating each other. Haman comes kind of like next to the king. He realized that Mordecai doesn't bow down to him, and he gets upset, takes the king, and asks the king that you got a group of people who is not doing what you asked to do. Let's kill them all. He's willing to fund it from his own treasure account. So he, in turn, want to not only kill Mordecai, but he want to get rid of all the Jews. So here we are. That's where we are in our lesson. I have actually went over all 3 chapters because now we're at chapter 7. Now, chapter 7, we actually have a second banquet because basically what has happened is Haman and have already plotted to kill and get rid of all the Jews. Mordecai have requested Esther to step up. So Esther has stepped up. She have arranged for a dinner for them to come, and at that dinner she invited Haman and the king and said, hey, let me have a second dinner because there's something I want to share with you. So here we are. We're at the second banquet, and here's the scheme is explained. All right, so verse 1 says, so the king and Haman went to dinner with Queen Esther. At the second dinner, while they were drinking wine, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what would you like? Half of my kingdom, just ask, and it's yours. And here's Queen Esther's response. If I have found favor in your eyes, O king, and if it please the king, give me my life and give my people their lives. We've been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, sold to be massacred, eliminated. If we had just been sold off into slavery, I wouldn't have brought it up. Our troubles wouldn't have been worth bothering the king over. So basically, when the king heard this, the king exploded. Who? Who is he? This monstrous. And he answered, Queen Esther answered, an enemy, an adversary, the evil Haman, said Esther. It's amazing that when we look at the next verse, the king was so in a rage that he left out of the palace garden to cool off. And Haman, and I like this portion right here, when he leaves out, because Haman did not realize Queen Esther was a Jew. It says that Haman stood there pleading with Queen Esther for his life. He could see that the king was finished with him and that he was doomed. And as the king came back from the palace garden into the banquet hall, Haman was groveling at the couch of which Esther reclined. And the king roared out, Will he even molest the queen while I'm just around the corner? And when the words left the king's mouth, all the blood drained from Haman's face. Haman goes over, if you can imagine this, he goes over pleading. Here's the man that is second in charge of King Ahasuerus, has built a gallows, has gotten the king to write an epic to destroy all of the Jews, and the plan backfired on him, not realizing that the queen, the king wife, is a Jew. And the scripture tells us that at that moment in time, the guards that came and draped a cape over Haman's face, realizing that you are doomed. The king does not even want to look at you anymore. So a revenge has gone wrong. The devious and the evil Haman was not successful at getting revenge for his enemy, Mordecai. For each of Haman's attempt at revenge, look up the corresponding scriptures and reveal how things turn out for Haman. So let's look at this. And we're going to jump back and forth, because I encourage you all to read this entire book while we are practicing social distancing. Because here in the 3rd chapter, verses 1, 2, and 5, it says, when Mordecai refused to bow down to Haman or give him any honor, Haman began to plot revenge against him. So let's look at how this unfolded, because this is amazing. Because when you jump now to chapter 6, Haman is forced to honor Mordecai. And if you look what happened after he established that, once he realized that Mordecai refused to bow down, because Mordecai tell him, I'm not going to bow down because I'm a Jew. And he plots a revenge to him. If you look at chapter 6, verse 10 and 1, Haman is forced to honor Mordecai because the king has a dream. If you go to chapter, at the end of chapter 2, you will notice that Mordecai unfolds a plot that 2 of the king eunuchs is trying to kill him. And they write it down in the book of Chronicles. Now, God takes insomnia from King Ahasuerus. When he couldn't sleep at night, who in a right mind asked for books of records? That's the book of the Chronicles, and asked to be read. And while he's reading the books of the Chronicles, he noticed Mordecai saved my life. Have we ever rewarded him? No, King, you didn't award Mordecai. So here in chapter 6, the king said, hey, Haman, what should you do for a man that have saved your life? And Haman actually named all these things you should do. And he said, do that to Mordecai. So Haman is forced to honor Mordecai, dressing him in a royal robe, putting him on a king's horse, leading him through the city, proclaiming, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. And again, this really makes Haman so fierce and angry that he has to do this. All right, next thing. Verse 3 and 6, not satisfied to get revenge on Mordecai alone, Haman convinced bribes the kings to order the destruction of all the Jews. And how did that backfire? When he became the king right-hand man, Mordecai issued that epic, and that backfired that gives all the Jews the right to protect themselves against any armed men who attack them and plunder the property of their enemies. So if you actually look into chapter 8, Mordecai became the right-hand man. He issues an epic stating anybody that the Jews have a right to protect themselves against anyone who try to attack them. Now, let me see, can I explain this? Basically, when the king writes something, in that first epic that Haman had him to write, that actually is law. And you can't go back and erase the law. You realize back in chapter 1, when he banished Queen Vashti, in chapter 2, he got all upset. Even though now this was a 4-year period from chapter 1 to chapter 2, he realized that he did something wrong, which is the reason why Unfold to have the beauty contest and he picks Esther as queen. Because once you put something in writing, you cannot go back and erase it. But so what the king did here, once Mordecai had him to convince him to destroy the Jews, he couldn't go back and erase that. He in turn made Mordecai his right-hand man, and then issue another edict that says anybody who tries to destroy the Jews have the right to protect themselves. And then Haman feels proud that he's the only person besides the king whom Esther has invited to her banquet. Because you remember, when he actually went back and he bragged to his wife, hey, the queen and the king, correction, the queen has invited me to the banquet, and it's only going to be another person there with the king, which is me. So that spoiled on his half, because Esther revealed the plot against her people and tells the king that it is wicked Haman who had created this scheme. And then chapter 5, verses 13 and 14, when Haman complains that seeing Mordecai is spoiling all his joy in life, his friends suggest he build a gallows to hang Mordecai on. That backfires. When the king learns from Queen Esther Haman's trickery, he is so engaged in rage that he orders Haman to be hanged on the gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. And in chapter 5, Haman feels superior to Mordecai as he boasts of his vast wealth and his many sons and his high position. And in chapter 8, because of his plot, Haman's estate, high office, and son was dealt with in this way. Esther gives Haman's estate to Mordecai in charge of the king, and gives Haman's job to Mordecai. And Haman hangs the 10 sons of Mordecai. So, and then we'll get to verse 9 and 10. It's Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, spoke up. Look over there. There's the gallows that Haman built for Mordecai, who saved the king's life. It's right next to Haman's house, 75 feet high. And what does King Ahasuerus says? Hang him on it. So Haman was hung on the very gallows that he built for Mordecai, and the king's hot anger cooled. It's interesting when you read this book of Esther, and I want to end with this. God is not mentioned anywhere in the book of Esther. But what we see is we see God's hand behind the scenes. We see him actually doing things. And just like today, while we are practicing social distancing, we need to recognize God's hand right behind the scene. Even though if you watch the news and they don't mention anything about God, you can see him working, because the thought to remember today is act justly in every situation. Thank you. See you in Sunday school.